Chain of responsibility design pattern is one of the behavioral design pattern. Chain of responsibility pattern is used to achieve the loose coupling in the software design, where a request from the client is passed to the chain of objects to process them, and then the object in the chain will decide themselves who will be processing the request and whether the request is required to send to the next object in the chain or not. Like consider you have one software where three handlers are there. Like you have one software and these are the three handlers that you have. So for any request from the client can come in your software and these three handlers are going to process them. You can also correlate this with the try catch statement in the exception in Java, where you have the multiple layers of try catch. So like that, we have the three different handlers in our software and the request that is come from the client. And then it's a responsibility of the handler one to decide to process this request or transfer this request to another handler. So the handler one will first decide to transfer this request to the handler 2. Now the handler 2 will again check that this particular request, either the handler 2 will process it or it will transfer that to handler 3. Now let's say handler 2 transfer that request to handler 3, and now handler 3 will also try to process the request, or if the handler 3 can't able to process that request, then it will go to the default case, that is this particular request can't be handled. So this is the chain of responsibility design pattern, where the handlers or the object are in the chain and they will decide themselves who will be processing the request. So it can be used multiple places, like you can also design the security layers in your software, where you have the multiple layers of security you can design, and according to the request the security layers will decide to process. Similarly, in case of ATM, the cash withdrawal also use the chain of responsibility. Now let's see the logger system. So this logger system here also use the chain of responsibility design pattern. So in the logger system, we have the different handlers. Like you have the error handler, or you can say the error logger, then you can have debug logger, and then you can have info logger. So these are the different loggers are there, and your system can generate the logs, multiple logs, or you can say the millions of logs are there, and these are the different loggers that you are there in your system. Now when the request that is coming from the logs from the client side, let's say this is one of the log where you have the string, that is the message, and the specific information about which particular log type is there. So this is an info type log. So these two informations you get in the logs that generated in the client side. Now it will first land at the error logger. The error logger will see that it's an info type of logger. So it will transfer this log to the next logger, which is a debug logger. Now it will land at the debug logger, and debug logger will also transfer this to the next logger, which is the info logger. And now this info logger is going to process this particular logs that is generated from the client side. So here in the logger system also we are using the chain of responsibility design pattern. Let's see this logger system in detail. So first we have the abstract class, which is a logger, and in this abstract class we have the method write, and then these are my subclasses, that is info class, and then error class, and then we have the debug class. So these are the classes which is extending this abstract class. Then of course they need to implement this method, which is write. So all these different classes are implementing this write method in their corresponding class. So this write is nothing but they will write the logs, if it's a info log, or it's a error log, or it's a debug log. So this is my one abstract class, and these are my subclasses which is extending this abstract class. And then here we create the instance of this logger abstract class in all these classes. So this logger is the instance of this abstract class. Then we have the method, that is set next logger, and here we are passing the instance of this logger class, and then setting that in this specific object, that is logger we have. Then we have the write method, and in the write method we are calling the write method, basically the write method of some different class. So here we will see how this chain of responsibility will flow between the classes. So in my current class, we are setting the next class instance where here in this set next logger. So here we are creating the instance of this logger class. This logger is the abstract class. In this, we can pass the instance of error class and then set that instance into this logger instance. And when we call the write method, this logger is having the instance of error class. It means it will call the write method of error class. So if you see from the inflow class, we are trying to call the write method of the error class. And that's how the chain of responsibility will flow between the classes. Similarly, in the error class, we again have this method that is setNextLogger, where we are passing the instance and set that instance into this object that is logger that we already have in this class. And then we have the write method, and here we are calling the write instance. So basically in this class, we are passing the instance of debug class, and we are passing the instance here and set that instance into this particular object that is logger. And when we call the write method of this error class, eventually it will call the write method of debug class, because this logger stores the instance of this debug class. So now the error can call the debug class write method. We have debug class where we have the method setNextLogger, and here also we are passing the instance of this abstract class which is a logger, and then we set that instance into this specific object which is a logger. And here also we are calling the write method, and in the write method we are basically calling from the instance the write method of that specific class. So that's how the communication between the classes are happening. And then this is my client code. So basically in my client code, we are calling this method which is get chain of loggers. So from the main, we are simply calling this method which is a get chain of loggers. And here, if you see, we are creating the three instances. That is the instance of this info class, instance of this error class, and instance of this debug class. And then we are calling the set next logger method of all these classes. So first we call the error dot set next logger, that is the set next logger method of this error class. And here we are passing the instance of debug. It means in this logger we are setting the instance of this debug class. Then we call the debug dot set next logger. So this is the set next logger method of the debug class, and this debug is the instance of this debug class. And here as an argument we are passing the instance of this info class. So we are creating the instance of the info class and passing here in this method. So basically this logger was having the instance of the debug. Similarly in this logger we have the instance of the info. So here we are storing the instance of the info class, and then when we call the write method of it, it will eventually call the write method of the info class. So basically from the debug now we are calling the info class. So in this particular method we are getting the instance of the error method, that is error is nothing but the instance of the error class, and correspondingly one by one we are keep on setting all these instances. Like in case of error we are setting the instance of debug, in case of debug we are setting the instance of info. So at the runtime when we call the write method, it will can call the write method of debug. Similarly debug can call the write method of info. So that's how the chain of responsibility process happens between the classes. Let's see the end-to-end flow with the help of code. So first we have the abstract class. So in the abstract class, this is my abstract logger. We have the method called write, and in this method we are passing the string, and then these are the three different variables, that is info, debug, and error. And then this is my concrete class which is info, and this class extends this abstract logger and correspondingly implement this write method that is present in this abstract class. Along with that we have this having an instance of this abstract logger. So this abstract logger is nothing but the abstract class, and here in this concrete class also we are creating the instance of this abstract logger. And then this is my set next logger method where we are passing this next logger and set it. So as I explained that in this set next logger we are setting the instance of the next class here. And then this is my log message. In the log message, we will verify that whether this particular message we need to process it or we need to transfer that to the next class method. So in the log message, we'll first verify that do we need to process it here and correspondingly call this write method of this class, or we need to call the log message of the next class. Similarly, this is my debug class and this is my error class. So these two classes are almost similar to this info class. Here also we have the log message, and then we are creating the instance of this abstract logger, and then here we have the method of write. So basically, let's say if I call info, and in the info, in the log message, if this current class log message can't able to process or write that message, in that case we will call the log message of the next class, because in this instance, that is the next logger, we have already set the instance of the next class. And then this is my client code. So in the client code, first we are creating the instance that we just explained, and then we are setting the next logger for all these different classes. Like for error, we are setting the debug instance, and for debug, we are setting the info instance. So in the debug, we are setting here the info, and in case of error, we are setting the debug. And then we get one instance. And let's say if we call the log message with this particular message, that is info type. So let's say it will first land at the error, and in the error it will verify that this message can't be processed by it. Then it will call the next logger.log message of the debug class, because in case of error we are setting the next instance as an instance of the debug class. So it will call the debug class log message. Now in the debug class log message, we'll verify that is this message can be processed by us? No, it can't. Then it will call the next logger log message. And what is the next logger of the debug class? So if you see, in case of debug class, we are setting the next logger as the info instance. So it will call the log messages of the info class, and then the info class log message will process this message. So this is how the chain of responsibilities happen between the multiple classes.